Hey, it's Dr. Kien, and welcome back to another episode of this podcast. I can't wait for you to meet our next guest. He is actually self-made billionaire and entrepreneur, starting multiple different companies, including Viome, Moon Express, Intellius, Infospace, a ton. He's on the board of the X Prize Foundation. Ladies and gentlemen, meet Naveen Jain.
Well, thanks, Dr. Kien. How are you?
Thank you for coming, and thank you for coming to our listeners. Now, we're going to talk about your companies and your most passionate projects. We're going to talk about how you find purpose. We're going to talk about how you stay healthy. But I want people to really get an understanding of who Naveen Jain is. You know, I think we both actually entered America as immigrants. I was a refugee back in 1979. Tell us about your upbringing.
Well, first of all, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure out that you and I are not pretty native here, right? Mm-hmm. I grew up in India, and I can guarantee you were not from India. In all seriousness, we lived in villages. We really didn't have a lot. There were days we didn't have food to eat. We didn't have a place called home. We moved from places to places. And, it was a tough life. An interesting thing is, none of that actually matters when you have an amazing family that cares about you. My mom and dad just absolutely did everything they could to give us everything we needed. And even if there was not enough, there was plenty of love. And that to me was really what, to me, my best memories are, just families sitting together and realizing we just don't have enough, and that was perfect. And we all realizing that the best thing we can do is to support each other. Came to this country with absolutely nothing, had $5 in my pocket, and didn't speak the language. And God has been very kind to us. And when I say God has been kind to us, too, I would say the society has been very kind to us. The people just absolutely with open arms embraced us, gave me a chance to really grow up in this country. And as I look back, things have just worked out amazingly well. I ended up starting, 6 or 7 different companies, and they've all been wildly successful. And at the same time, I feel that despite all that success, I find myself at times lost, and I find that there is something is missing. And when I start to soul search what was that missing thing was, I felt that there was so much debt I owe it to the society. And the people who helped me don't need my help. So here I am with something that I have so much of debt that I can't pay back. And that's when I realized that I know how to do that, is to pay forward. That I'm going to go out and do everything I can to make the lives better for people as such, and also every entrepreneur that I meet, I want to help them be successful. And if I can't pay back, I will pay forward. And that's one way I'm going to be able to pay my debt back to the society. So every company that I start, to me, that starts with a single goal. God forbid, if I'm actually successful in doing what am I doing, would I be able to help the billion people? Would I be able to, at a large scale, move the humanity forward? Are things that I am doing that is going to actually change the trajectory of how humanity is going to live? And if we can't do that, life is too short to be working on things that are not meaningful and that are not scalable.
So a lot of exciting projects that you've started. What made you decide to start a moon company? What made you want to go to the moon?
Well, to some extent, if you start to think about, we as humans are living on a single spacecraft, and we call this spacecraft planet Earth. Single point of failure. If our planet Earth gets hit by a large asteroid, we all as humans will be completely destroyed. And if you don't believe me, ask dinosaurs. As a species, the dinosaurs just completely disappeared. And if you could hear any dinosaur rolling in their graves, what would they be saying? If they had one good entrepreneurial dinosaur, they'll be roaming on the moon and the Mars and beyond. Didn't happen for them. Let's just make sure we humans the next generation don't look at us another set of dinosaurs. They couldn't create a multi-planetary society. So our ultimate goal really is, what if we can create a multi-planetary society? And the moon is the first place that you want to settle down. It is close to our planet. The problems of living on the moon are very similar to problems that living on the Mars. Very high radiation, temperature difference are a lot, and there is lot less gravity. If we can solve these problems while we're still 3 days away, we don't have to go to Mars until we solve those problems. So as I say, it's better to be a lunatic 3 days away than to be a Martian 6 months away. And anybody who watched the movie Martian, I swear, Tom Hanks is brilliant, but I don't want to be there.
Now, you're pretty close. Aren't you going to be landing sometime pretty soon, in the next few months?
Yeah, so we actually have a plan to land on the moon this year. And here's what's interesting is, when we land on the moon this year, not only we become the first private company ever to do so, we actually symbolically become the 4th superpower. When I started the company, I could have thought about many reasons why it absolutely makes no sense to start this company, right? You look at the stuff and say, it's hard. No one has ever done it. No private company has ever left Earth orbit, period. So despite you may hear that Elon is going to space and Jeff Bezos is going to space and Richard Branson is going to space, the fact is all of them are suborbital. Everything is in the suborbital, right? No one has ever left Earth orbit. As a matter of fact, we are the only company in the universe today that has permission to leave Earth orbit and land on the moon. So think about that for a second. President Obama signed into the law that says anything that we bring back, we will own it. There is a complete clarity of law. So you think as an entrepreneur, there's so many reasons we couldn't have started, and every reason, one by one, every hurdle we crossed. And when I tell entrepreneurs that every single time, you cannot worry about what is going to happen in the future. You say, I'll cross that bridge when I get there. And when you get to that bridge and you cross that bridge, your job is to burn the bridge behind you, because there is no going back. If you think you are going back, you have a plan B. And people who have a plan B, that becomes a plan A. So I always say, you move forward and you keep going forward. As you face the hurdle, you cross it. Life of an entrepreneur is like a heartbeat. When it's flat, you're dead. You want to see these ups and downs, because that tells you you're still alive. When things are absolutely in the worst case, you are at the bottom of that beat. You believe life is not worth living. And I remind everyone, this is the winter. You just last long enough to pass this winter. Summer is coming, and the next beat is going to be right up. And the most important thing to remember is, when you are on the top of the world, don't get too cocky. Just know the winter is coming and the next beat is going to be down. So just stay humble and enjoy the process of that heartbeat.
That's great. What do you plan on bringing back in your first expedition? And do I get to have a moon rock?
The answer is, you can get a moon rock today, except that you don't bring them naturally. The nature brings them to you. So every single day, there is a space rock falling on the planet Earth. It's called meteorites, right? There are a lot of them come from the moon, or the Mars for that matter, right? So what happens is, very large pieces of asteroids are hitting the moon, and we can see these craters with our naked eyes. All those craters are not because there's a Swiss cheese up there. It's because the asteroids are constantly hitting the moon, and when they hit the moon, many of the rocks pass the velocity of the gravity, and they actually go into the space, and they get sucked by the Earth gravity, and they fall in some places. If they fall on the ocean or they fall in the forest, nobody finds them. When they fall them in deserts, it's easy. All the plain stuff, and you see the black stuff, and you say, that might be a meteorite. Or you find them in Antarctica. All the white stuff, that black stuff sitting there, say, that could be a meteorite. And that's how you find them. So I do collect a lot of these. So I do have a very large collection of the space rocks from the moon and the Mars and the beyond, right? So it's just a fun thing to do. But it's something special about holding these things in your hand, that they were not only part of another planet, they were traveling for billions of years. And you're holding that piece in your hand. And you imagine, when I am there, would I be able to find where it came from, right? So imagine, it's only a matter of time, maybe 15 years or so, when the life is going to be born on, say, on the moon. There's going to be a baby on the moon, and the parents looking at the baby and saying, look up, we come from that planet. Imagine that for a second, right? So I think, in a short term, there are going to be people going to the moon. People are going to be bringing the stuff back. But more importantly, we're going to be using the resources on the moon to live on the moon. There is water on the moon. Water is an amazing thing. The ingredients being hydrogen and oxygen. That means we have now rocket fuel and we have fuel for humanity. 6 months ago, Japan did the things. They found a massive lava tube, which is just about 100 meters down, 300 meter wide and 100 meter long. You could have whole New York in there, right? You could live inside the lava tube, pump the oxygen, you can build a city. And you don't have to worry about radiation for a short term. In the long term, nature has done some amazing things. We find the bacteria are living in the radioactive nuclear waste. Think about that for a second. The radioactive nuclear waste, the nature has figured out a way to keep its DNA protected from the high radiation, and figured out how to use the radiation as a source of energy. If we can take the genes from those bacteria, use the CRISPR technology to modify our own human genes, we will not only become radiation resistant, we won't need the food. Radiation will become our food. So in the evening, we're going to hold our honey's hand and say, honey, do you want to go out and get some radiation? Right? These are all the possibilities.
I find it amazing that you tap into so many different fields. I mean, here you are in space. What made you interested? What does somebody that does not know, that did not come from a healthcare background, decide, I'm going to tap into healthcare?
Well, just like that, I didn't come from the, background in the rocket science either, right? I personally believe once you are good at something and you are expert at anything, you actually become mostly useless in that industry, because to become an expert, you have to have a knowledge base that you actually take it for granted, because that knowledge base is what makes you an expert. That means at best, you can improve it by 10% or 15%. When you come from outside the industry, you're able to challenge the foundation that people have taken it for granted, and you're able to improve it by 10 times or 100 times. And that's where the disruption happens. So every time in the space industry, we change the space industry by saying we can use a rocket that can only go to low Earth orbit, and we can use our own spacecraft to go to the rest. That brought the cost down from $1 billion to under $10 million. I'm doing the same thing in healthcare. Everyone in the healthcare has been focused on curing the diseases. And nobody was really thinking about why do the disease happens. When there is a whole system around you that is designed to keep you sick. Think about what our healthcare system is today. It is not even a disease care system. It is a symptom suppression system. What they do is, you tell them a list of symptoms, they take a couple of them, put them together and name it. Once they name it, they have an insurance code for it, and then there is a drug for it. They don't know these set of symptoms could be caused by 10 different reasons. The same drug cannot work for all, but they still have the same drug for everything, right? I have no knowledge of the healthcare. I started to read a lot of the science literature, and it became so clear that every single chronic disease, now whether you can name the things as Parkinson's and Alzheimer or autism, you can name it depression, you can name it anxiety, you can name it OCD and PTSD, or you can name them diabetes or obesity, autoimmune diseases or cancer. Every one of them is fundamentally caused by a chronic inflammation. Chronic diseases happen because you have chronic inflammation. What's really interesting is our gut is really the key here. So I'm going to step back for a second before I go there. The reason I started a healthcare company, because I fundamentally believe for the first time we have technology at our disposal to be able to make a chronic disease a matter of choice, not matter of bad luck. So imagine if you and I can create a world where each one of us is empowered with the information we need and what we can do, the actions we can take to not be sick. That's what I mean by making sickness a matter of choice. I can't create a world where no one is sick, but I can create a world where you can decide whether you want to be sick or not. I can't force you to take actions, but I can tell you the actions you need to take not to be sick. And that's what I mean by, can illness be optional? And I'm absolutely at this point convinced that we as society have come to a point where we can make that happen.
I definitely agree. This is something our audience knows so much. One of our phrases, health is a choice, disease is optional. So tell us about, there are a lot of other companies out there testing the microbiome, and we know the microbiome is associated with a lot of chronic conditions. What makes this testing a little bit different from the other companies?
Before I go talk about that, would you mind to tell me what you understand by what microbiome is?
Well, the microbiome basically is everything. Well, we have microbiome on our skin, we have microbiome in our mouth, we have microbiome in our gut. And it's basically an ecosystem between the bacteria we have, and we've got probably, what would I say, like trillion bacteria in our gut that actually has about, like 1,000 times more genes than we do that basically interact with us. So we are an ecosystem between our microbacteria and our gut.
Yeah, so, I completely agree with you. So first of all, we as humans, there are more foreign cells in our body than the human cells. That itself tells you that, the things that we are so proud of is not even us. When you look at from the perspective of the gene expression, the human DNA only produces about 20,000 genes. The microbiome, and it's not just the bacteria. These are the bacteria, the viruses, the phages, the yeast, the fungus, the mold, all of these things as ecosystem, the trillions of them inside our gut alone, and they produce 2 million genes. We are less than 1% human. We are walking, talking ecosystem. And these things are not good or bad. These are the ecosystem, like a rainforest. Every inch of rainforest is different, and everyone is luscious. That means you can have a different ecosystem and still be very healthy, right? So now the question is, what is so new? We know about microbiome. We know the microbiome is the key to our health, and people have been trying to measure the microbiome. What happens is, in the early days of any technology, the first companies that come out are generally the scam artists and the charlatans and the people who are selling you snake oil. And this is no different. So in the early days, the companies like Viome, the American Gut Project, what they're doing is they're actually giving you the information that is completely useless. And here's what, every time you do any test, look for the word 16S. Viome uses a technology called 16S, and I'm going to describe what that means. 16S is a fraction of a gene that only exists in the bacteria. So you can never see any viruses, yeast, fungus, mold. The other thing is, you can only look at the genus that bacteria comes from, not what species it is and what strain it is. And you say, well, that's what does it matter? At a genus level, it's like saying, well, there are men, there are women, there are children. That doesn't really matter. Every country has men, women, and children. So what's different about your country? At a genus level, it makes no difference. But here's the best part. What we do is we don't even look at, not only we look at every strain of every bacteria, virus, every yeast, fungus, and mold. We look at how active they are. But most importantly, we look at what are they doing. We are measuring not just the DNA, we are looking at the RNA of every organism. That means we know they are alive, number one, and number two, exactly what they are producing, how much of butyrate they are producing. These are short chain fatty acids that our body needs. We look at how much LPS, which is the lipopolysaccharide, that's the inflammatory compounds, how much of that they are producing, how much of the other nutrients like vitamins they are producing. So we look at what they are actually doing, and then we use the artificial intelligence to take that data, and then we look at how does we as a host responding to all the things this bacteria is doing. How does our body digest carbs? How does our body digest protein? How does our body digest fat? We take that data, and then we take all the things that you tell us, we put that under artificial intelligence and say, you Kien should not be eating spinach and avocado, even though everybody will tell you that's healthy. Eat more wheat, don't eat oats. Don't eat protein and fat, eat more carbs. What I'm describing is what my diet told me. Counterintuitive. When I did that, which everybody told me was wrong, because healthy diet means no carbs, eating a spinach, avocado, oats. That may have been good for other people. So what I'm telling you is that there is no such thing as universal healthy diet. A diet that's good for you may not be good for me, and a diet that's good for me today may not be good for me 3 months from now, because as you change your diet, your ecosystem changes. And when your ecosystem changes, the things that were good now becomes bad. Then you have to retune and readjust your diet.
So how often would you say people need to have their microbiome checked?
So if you're using our service, if you're using Viome and you're actually following the recommendation, we recommend that you test every 3 to 4 months. If you're not following a recommendation, I would say don't waste your money and don't ever check again. Because if you're not going to follow the recommendation, why waste your money, right? The only way to stay healthy is to constantly stay your body in tune. It's not like you tune your car once and for the rest of the life, car will stay tuned. You got to tune it every year. You got to tune it every few months, right? This is a very complex body. And if you don't keep it in tune, what happens is, it's not that you get sick. You slowly start get inflammation. And I want people to know that the chronic disease is not something that happens overnight.
Right.
Chronic diseases happens over time. It's not people like, surprised, oh my God, I can't believe I just caught diabetes. You don't catch diabetes. You don't become obese. Oh my God, I can't believe I caught obesity. Trust me, you have been obese for a long time. Right? So you don't catch cancer, you develop cancer over a long period of time. So the best thing you can do is, even though you may think you are healthy because the symptoms are not clear, by the time you get to see the symptoms, the body has already been damaged significantly. It takes a lot longer to recover. But if you can keep the body in tune, then it's easier and less expensive. Just like a car. If you don't change your oil, you don't tune your car, sure, it runs a whole lot longer without changing the oil. And you say, why was I wasting my money? And one day it just falls apart, and your engine needs to be replaced, and your heart needs to be replaced, and your kidney needs to be replaced. It's very expensive, right? So, and the best people, what they do, they keep the car, they service the car all the time. And that's the same thing our body.
That's one of the things our listeners know very well, is that health is actually a personal discovery process, but it's a process that iteratively changes. You don't stick with a diet plan or an exercise plan the entire time. You have to be able to change with that. Is that correct?
And it is not only correct, but the thing is, so far people have been treating their body like a black box. And they're saying, oh, Kien does this every day, and look at, he's healthy, maybe I should do that. The point is, what works for one person is not going to work for another person. The best thing to look at is 2,000 years ago, a philosopher, Hippocrates, said, all disease start in the gut. And then what he said was very interesting. He said, one man's food is another man's poison. Think about that. He knew about personalized diet. And then what did he say, the third? Let food be thy medicine, let thy medicine be the food. He realized we don't need the pharmaceutical companies to keep us healthy. The food is all we need if we know what is it exactly lacking in our body. The synthetic drugs are simply suppressing the symptom, and when they suppress one symptom, they cause 3 more symptoms. And guess what happens? They have a drug for every one of those symptoms, right? So pharmaceutical companies believe the chronic disease is their way of having a subscription business, right? They don't want you to die because your credit card stops working, and they don't want you to get cured because you stop buying their product. One of the pharmaceutical company CEO once said, the best drug that we develop are the ones that people have to take for the rest of their life. Now think about what he's just saying. He said best drugs are the ones that don't cure people. Think about it, right?
No, exactly right.
How can someone like that can stand up in a mirror and say, I'm doing something good? So as you know, I am on this mission. I am going to dedicate my life to solving this problem of the chronic disease. Interesting thing is, when we started the company, we already have 10,000 plus people already using our service. We are already have people who are benefited, people who are had symptoms, brain fog, people who are taking drugs for diabetes, acne, depression, obesity. We don't make any claim that we actually cured these diseases. Interesting things happen. When you cure their gut, these symptoms disappear. In fact, there's woman who's was Dr. Oz, and the show is not even aired. She posted on a Facebook, and I just saw. She said, I was 1 week away from getting a gastric bypass surgery because I'm so overweight. I did my Viome test. In 4 months, I lost 70 pounds, 70. We didn't set out to cure weight loss. She had a leaky gut. We fixed her leaky gut, and it went away. Other woman says, my acne is gone, and I used to always be anxious. It's just not there. We didn't know that was a symptom. We fixed her gut. The interesting thing is, when you fix the root cause, the symptoms go away. So we don't go out and say, oh, I'm going to fix the diabetes, I'm going to cure depression, I'm going to cure anxiety. These are just the symptoms, right?
And the root causes are actually very much basic. It's your microbiome, it's how well you sleep, it's how well you eat, it's whether you exercise, it's all these things.
And stress.
Oh, that's the hugest one. I wanted to save it for last, of course. Now, we're running low on time, but there's 2 more questions I'd love to ask. We did an interview with Dr. Steve Cole at UCLA on epigenetics.
Yes.
And what we discovered is that those people that exhibit eudaimonic happiness, those are the people that have a deep sense of purpose. They are gifted with longer telomeres, which means that they live longer, and they have improved health and immune system. A lot of viewers want to ask, how do you discover your purpose?
Finding the purpose is actually really easy. Find something that you're willing to die for and then live for it. Or you can do a second approach. Imagine you have everything. You wanted $1 billion, you have it. You wanted a wonderful family, you have it. You have everything you wanted. What would you do? And if you do that today, you will get everything that you want. Happiness is a choice. I say your success will never be measured by how much money you have in the bank. It will be measured by how many lives you've been able to improve. When you do something for someone without expecting anything back, that is the most happiness you will ever get, because your genes release the serotonin, they release the oxytocin, and that allows you to feel inherently good about who you are. When you do the transactional relationship, you do this for me, I do this for you, you never feel good. To some extent, you feel that you just had that dirty transactions, right? So to me, the best thing I ever do is when I do things and I expect nothing back in return, and that gives me the inherent happiness. And I want every one of listener to enjoy that thing. I can tell you, next thing you walk in, just help someone and just walk away without telling them your name. And the amount of happiness you will feel, there is no amount of money you can make that will give you that happiness.
Yeah. Our last question is this. So many people think of health and success as being very different. How does somebody with the amount of success that you have stay healthy?
Well, again, it's not about following the habits of any person, because what I do will not work for you. In fact, when people ask and say, hey, what are your rituals in the morning? Because if I want to be successful, I want to follow the same ritual. I honestly think that's the dumbest question, because you want to follow the thought process of the people you believe are successful. For example, Tony Robbins takes ice bath every day. You can take an ice bath 3 times a day, and I guarantee you, you're not going to become Tony Robbins. You become Tony Robbins by thinking like Tony Robbins. So follow people who are successful, their thought process, not their rituals. Yeah, what works for me is not going to work for you. You got to find what works for you.
So maybe that thought process is knowing that health is a part of success.
Health is a part of the success, and having a mindset of possibilities. Imagine that everything can be created, having a mindset of abundance, not having a mindset of scarcity. Never feel something can't be done, because the minute you believe it can't be done or it's impossible, it becomes impossible for you and not anyone else. So dream so big that people think you're crazy, and never be afraid to fail, because you only fail when you give up. Everything else is just a pivot.
And we're going to stop with that. Thank you,
Thank
Naveen,
you,
for
Ken.
your time. And remember, you are your best medicine.